Okay, to start our project of our felted succulents, we are going to need our fibers. We're going to need the piece of bubble wrap. We're going to need a tray so that we can keep the soapy water contained a little bit. We're going to need soapy water, that is right over here. And the fibers and our pre-felt. Now this is a sheet of pre-felt that you have. And this is going to be the base for all three of our spirals that will become our felted succulents, okay? And I say spirals because what we're going to do is divide this into three triangular strips, okay? And each strip is going to be embellished with a different color so that we have three different varieties of succulents, not only in the way we cut the petal shapes, but also in the colorations of the actual leaves themselves. So first thing to do, let's sort of get an imaginary line, and if you need more than an imaginary line, you can take anything that will help you. Right here I've got my piece of netting, and I'm just going to use that to sort of create a line for this first area, this first strip. And it's not, you know, a huge angle because we want to have about this much room at the small end and then go as wide as we need to on the larger end, okay? So I'm going to choose the green fibers, and I'm just going to open up the green. We'll work with the green first. I'm just opening up this roving so that the fibers are a little looser. They don't clump up on me, and I can pull them apart any which way. We're not going to use all of these most likely, but we do want to fluff them all out. And the reason we're fluffing them out is so that we can get a little bit of kind of a cloud. We can put these on as strips. However, if we put them on as strips, we're going to see those lines, and those lines aren't necessarily going to add to our design. Having this broken up and fluffed out into some random cloud, for lack of a better term, is going to give us a wonderful variegation, and that's what we're going for. We're going for a wonderful variegation of color because we're just going to lay it down and make sure that it is going all along the length, and I am making sure that I've got fiber solid at one end. It can drift off into no fiber at the other end, but I want to make sure that I have fiber at the top end so that the tips of my succulent leaves will have that variegation of color on them. So I'm just fluffing again, getting a little bit more to finish this out, and I am focusing just right on the line here at the top of the petals. Get just a tiny bit more. We did almost use all of this, so I planned well. And we're just going to put this down right in here. Okay, so this is our first set of leaves. All right, I'm going to move the netting aside, and as I'm moving it aside, I'm realizing I can come up just a little bit more. And now I'm going to do the same thing here, and we're going to go with our next color. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the orange in the middle, and we're just going to fluff it up. Just take little bits of it at a time when you've got it fluffed. Our goal here is just to make sure we don't have any straight lines. We want to have just a beautiful variegation, just kind of a fluffy little bit of color right along the top edge of our leaf to give us that that hint of sun, that hint of color that succulents sometimes have. Fluffing up some more here. Add some more here. It's going to give us some beautiful color on the tips of these succulent leaves. All right, and there is our second succulent strip. I'm going to move the netting completely off, and on this third one I am going to work this area here, but I'm looking and I'm thinking I'm going to slide this like I did the other one. I'm going to slide this off this way just a little bit more. Each one of these will have, you know, about the same depth to the leaves, but I wanted to make sure that when we do this, we have as even a coverage as we can. And so now I'm coming in with the blue. So we have the silvery green, that's going to be the tips of one of our succulents. We have this beautiful just hint of orange, it's going to be the tip of our other succulent. And then we're going to have this silvery blue. So we'll have green tipped, we'll have orange tipped, and we'll have blue tipped leaves. And that way we'll have a nice variegation and a nice combination of colors. It just, if you've seen pictures of succulents, I dare you to go on to Pinterest. Yeah, we've got some straight lines there, don't want straight lines. Go on to Pinterest and look up succulents, and the number of colors of the different succulents just flat out amazes me. They're just stunningly beautiful. And let's get a little bit more to finish up this line. And then we can wet this down and get started felting. This is a very easy project to get started with wet felting because we're using pre-felt. That's the base fabric that we're using here. It's partially felted already. So by adding our fibers lightly on top of that, we are going to be able to create the felt for our 3 strips to create our succulents very, very easily. All right, so we've got our 3 different strips ready to go here, and I am just, you know what, I've got just a tiny bit of green left. I'm just going to go for it and just put all of it on because we can fit a little bit more on here. I'm just going to lay it right in there on top, and I've got tiniest bit of orange. Why leave the leftover fibers for the fiber bar? Let's just go ahead and add them on. And let's go right there. Okay, so we have our fibers laid out, and now we need to wet down our fibers. So to do that, I'm going to lay my netting across the top of our layout. And I'm using one piece of netting, but I have got a little bit of a fold in it here so that I can cover the entire layout here. All right, and then just press down a little bit just to make sure that it's steady. Now I am using cold soapy water, and this soapy water has got an awful lot of soap in it, which is exactly what I want to start out with. Now this tool that I'm using is called a ball browse. And you may not have a ball browse, that's okay. You can use a gardening can, you know, that's got a nice little gentle sprayer on it. You can use your hands to just very slowly and very carefully dribble the water over your layout, and then it's just a matter of pressing that moisture, that liquid soap, through the entire bit of your layout. Both the areas that don't have any additional fibers, and especially the areas that do have your fibers on there, because we want to start building a connection between the fibers that we added and the pre-felt that's on the underneath. So the first part of this, I'm going to move off of the tray for just a moment, but I do have a towel here. And the reason I moved off the tray is because my layout is just the tiniest bit wider than my tray, and I want to make sure that I get every little bit of this layout massaged. And so we're just going to give it a gentle massage. We're not doing any pressure at all right now. We've just pushed the water to make sure that it's throughout the entire piece. And this is on top of my bubble wrap right now. And then we're just doing a gentle massage to build up a skin on the outside of the fibers that we added. The pre-felt has kind of a skin to it because it's been felted enough that it can be handled gently without pulling apart into the fibers again. But the fibers that we added haven't been. You saw how fluffy they were. And so our first goal in working with this piece is to get those fibers to start connecting to the pre-felt underneath. And we do that by giving a gentle massage over the entire surface and encouraging those new fibers that we added, the blue and the orange and the green, encouraging those fibers to form a bit of a skin so that they will start connecting down with the pre-felt and not trying to connect outwards and upwards. And I can see the beautiful colors underneath my netting here. Again, I am just doing a very, very gentle massage. I'm barely touching the surface. You can see that I'm, working up some suds, but it's not a heavy scrubbing. And I'm working in different directions too. The more directions that we work the fibers, the stronger they will connect to one another. So when I'm working the fibers this way, those fibers are connecting this way. When I'm working the fibers this way, they're connecting this way. When I work them in a circular motion, they're connecting in yet another direction. So the more directions we can encourage those fibers to connect, the stronger our felt is going to be. Now we're making succulents that are going to be in little clay pots that are going to sit on a tablescape or on a shelf, so they're not going to be handled a great deal, but we still want to make sure that we've got a nice connection with our felt and that our fibers are coming together beautifully. So you can see I've just been working this for a couple of minutes. I'm very careful as I pull off the netting because the fibers can sometimes begin to migrate through that netting, and we want to make sure that they stay right here on the pre-felt where they're supposed to be. You can see from the lines here that are dragging that we're getting a little connection. So lift up your netting every now and again just to make sure that your fibers are not connecting to your netting. And so we've got a nice start here. What we're going to do next is get another piece of bubble wrap, and we're going to place this on top, and then we're going to start gently rolling. Okay, so we've got another piece of bubble. Get that bubble wrap with the bubble side down, and now we're just pressing straight down. Again, this is another direction that we can encourage those fibers. And I've laid out the project with the bubble wrap underneath, bubble sides up. This piece is bubble sides down so that we can have the agitation of the bubbles working on the fibers for us. And now when it comes to rubbing on top of bubble wrap, you need to have your hands a little slick. And so I'm just going to start massaging with the bubble wrap on top. Now this is a piece that's got a pocket in it, so I'm just going to stick my hand inside here. This is a piece of packaging that I got, and it works out really quite well. Again, I am just gently massaging still. There's not much pressure in my hand. It's just a matter of massaging those bubbles into my layout. Up my bubble wrap. Oops. Got a little bit of the fiber grabbing hold. Just always be careful. Alright, we're looking good. Now, most of our action has been from the top side. Now I'm going to flip it over and we're going to work the back side. Now, I don't have to worry so much on the back side about fibers moving around because this is pre-felt underneath here. It's all one piece. It's a little piece of fabric. It's not as fragile as the fibers on the front side. So I can take and I can work this side a little bit more aggressively because those fibers are already partially felted. But again, I am just working the bubbles on both sides of the piece. And we're just going to go back and forth for a bit until we get this to the point where we are ready to start rolling. If your hands start to get some traction, you want to make sure you put a little more moisture on your hands. And that'll help them glide over the surface of the bubble wrap. You see how I'm changing direction every once in a while. Alright, we're going to flip it back over. And now we'll work this side again. A little more moisture. It's been sitting face down on the towel, so any moisture that was there has now been soaked into the towel. Always have plenty of towels or microfiber towels on hand when you're wet felting. Microfiber towels in particular soak up a huge amount of liquid, and that can save you sometimes from a big mess if you've got a microfiber towel around. Lift this off and check our fibers. Fibers are staying down. They're integrating nicely. Ooh, look at that shading. that's happening. That's going to make for some lovely, lovely petals. All right, so the next part that we're going to do is take our piece. Let me move my succulents out of the way. And we are going to wrap it around a towel. That's going to give us a little bit of a center, a core. We're just going to wrap all the way around, and then I am moving this back onto my tray. And I'm going to grab another towel, the one that's sitting underneath my water here. I'm going to wrap up even more. And now we're ready to roll. So we're just going to gently roll back and forth, and I'm going to count out about 50 rolls, and after we get to 50, then I'm going to open the package up and I'm going to turn it a quarter of a circle around. So I'm going to turn it to a 90 degrees. So north is going to become east, and then it will become south, and then it will become west. And when I've gone all 4 compass directions around, then I'm going to take a look at it, assess, and we will come back and do some more rolling if needed. We may, however, at the end of those first 200 rolls, so 50 each direction, we may find out that we are just felted enough to continue on to our next part of the process. So I am going to flip the camera onto time-lapse mode so that you don't have to sit here for the actual length of time, and you go do your rolling. Remember, 50 rolls each direction, and you're going to turn it a quarter of a turn each time so that you get rolling on each of the 4 different directions. All right? So see you back here after I get the rolling done, and after you get the rolling done. Okay, so we did our rolling. I'm doing the pinch test where I've added fibers, and those fibers have connected nicely. So our felt is coming together, and I can look on the back side and I can sort of see a bit of shading where those fibers have migrated through, but we want to give it just a little bit more help to migrate. Okay, so we're just going to lift and thwack it a little bit, and I'm just lifting and gently tossing it down onto my bubble wrap just to give it a little extra agitation in more of a forceful way because our fibers have come together nicely. The other thing we can do at this point is we can take and we can gently scrub from the back side. I would not scrub on the front side, but if we scrub from the back side, we can get some additional agitation onto the fibers that we added to give us our color definitions and our variations of our 3 colors for our 3 sets of leaves. And all of this we're doing with very simple tools: soap and water, bubble wrap, a tray, and even the tray, if you didn't have it, if you had plenty of toweling around, you'd be fine, and our hands. That's really what we've got. So let's take a look at the front side. Okay, so I scrubbed a little hard. I've got a couple of little rough areas, but that's okay. I'm going to squeeze out some of the excess moisture, and I'm just going to go back and we're going to take this piece of felt now. It's still very delicate. We're not making something hardy that's going to stand up to a lot of abuse, but we are creating something that will have a little bit of stay with it power. So I'm just rolling with the towels, and I just want to do a little bit more final rolling. This just gives us a different way to agitate the fibers, to do that fulling process, to get our fibers to come together just a little bit more firmly so that we can manipulate our fibers for this next part of creating our succulents without having to worry about those pieces coming apart on us. So we want a little bit of structure. We don't want a lot of structure because there's still some shaping to do. So this is sort of an advanced pre-felt that we're making here, just to give us enough structure to do the cutting and the stretching that we need to do for this next part. I'm gently going to pull this away from the toweling. I'm going to go ahead and move everything but the microfiber towel off. Put the microfiber towel back down. And the only reason I'm grabbing that is because it's white. So here is our basic piece of felt that we've got. Now the next thing to do is to create our leaves. And to do that, we are going to cut this into our 3 different strips. And you can see this cuts very, very easily. All right, so there is one set of leaves. Here is the next set of leaves. All right, so now we have our 3 different leaves that we're going to do. I'm going to put the orange and the blue off to the side. The first one that we're going to work on is this shaping here. I'm going to work on the shaping just to make, and I know I need to get the names of these different varieties down. We're just going to work the shaping for these sort of spiky, thick kind of leaves. They remind me of a jade plant, but to do those, I am just taking and cutting strips about like this, all the way down. And I know I said all the way down, I meant all the way across. I'm going about the same amount of distance down so that the inner leaves will be in a little shorter and the outer leaves will be a little longer, okay? And now what we're going to do is just cut the tips off. Now we could have done this all in one, but for me this works easier when I do it in separate motions. Just giving it a tiny little point. Doesn't even have to be a point, just has to taper at the top. And the tapering doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be the same on each one. In fact, it's probably better if it's not the same on each one. And really the only difference in each of these succulents is how we trim off and cut the leaves. That's really the only difference. Let me move these bits off to the side. These I can let dry and I can use them for stuffing for another project. I can, because they're advanced pre-felt, I can even add them to a wet felted project and use them for texture in a landscape perhaps. That's how I created my falling leaves felt painting that just won an award. But these little scraps can come in handy in other projects, so I always save everything. It's not a surprise to anyone that knows me. Okay, so I have the leaves all trimmed for this first succulent. And what I'm going to do is get this wet again. I know, I just got it unwet, right? So we're getting it wet again because we need to do a little shaping of these leaves. get it undone here. And the first thing I need to do is just take and gently squish this leaf and do a little bit of a rolling. And I'm just encouraging each of these leaves to sort of felt to the center of the leaf so that we build up a little bit of structure, a little bit of dimension here. We want these leaves to look like they've got a nice, thick, juicy leaf in there. And so we're just pinching and twisting and getting those fibers to come together in a different way so that we can get those leaves to look the way we want them to look for this first succulent. And this is tedious. I'm just going to keep working them, but I'll be quiet while I'm working them. I'm just twisting and moving. See if I can move the camera down just a bit. Show you a little bit better how I'm doing this. You see how we're building in that shape and that structure. So instead of a flat leaf, we're getting more of a fingerling kind of leaf where it's got some beefcake kind of to it. Those strong fingers coming up. And we can be a little more aggressive with this in putting together the leaves and giving them that extra little bit of structure because we are, you know, again, advanced pre-felt. This could still be pulled apart, okay? That's why I'm calling it advanced pre-felt, but it's not as delicate as the pre-felt was when we began, the green by itself. And it's definitely more than the colored fiber that we added to give some dimension and color to each of these leaves. So I've just gone down and I've just sort of scrunched and rolled all of the leaves into these wonderful little fingers just to give them some structure. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and roll this up from the small side to the larger side, to the longer leaves, and we're just building up a little bit of the structure of our succulent here, and we're just going to start giving it gentle rolls back and forth. And we can even roll this on the microfiber towel, roll it up in the microfiber towel, just to give it a little bit of agitation. Again, that agitation is what causes the felting to happen. Let's take a look. Now Now for this next part, we're just going to take and fold back just about half, just about, oh, I don't know, it's about half an inch, I guess. And I want to roll so that the colored part where we added the extra fibers for the color, so that that part shows. And by folding up this bit here, it gives us a little bit extra room between each layer of the leaves. And then we can start playing with our design and shaping a little bit, pulling our leaves out, giving them extra little bits of movement here. But this gives us the base for what is going to be our succulent here. So this is ready for us to take and rinse in hot water, then cold water, then hot water, then cold water. And then we'll worry about adding our coloration from there. But that's how each of these strips is going to work. And the first part we want to do is just make sure that we've got our petals looking more like the fingers that we need them to look like. And then we can move on to the next one. So I'm going to rinse this piece and we'll come back to it, but I want to show you how we're cutting the other two leaves for these. Now this second leaf that we're going to do is just kind of a round shape. And I am going to start out at the small end, and for this one I'm just cutting kind of a little bit of a round shape. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut another little bit of a round shape. And I'm just going to go all the way around, all the way to the end. I don't want these to get too big, so I'm trying to keep them all about the same size. But I am staying very definitely in the uppermost portion of my strip here, and I'm just rounding each of those leaves out. Because when we get to the folding process, when we start shaping those petals a little bit more, is when we'll be able to flare each of these petals out to give us that texture. And you see how I'm sticking right at the very top of my fiber here. So we've got all of that color right there. All right, so this is ready to go. Our third row of petals, third succulent, whatever we're going to call it. Again, we're using all of the scraps. So the first one is going to be the fingers, and that's what we're using the green for. The second one with the blue is going to be our rounded succulent leaves. The third one is going to have the little spikes on them, okay? And so for that, we're doing very similar to what we just did, only I'm doing a little bit of a spike. And that little bit of a spike, I want as imperfect as possible. So I am just, see how I'm just giving a little bit of a spike on the leaf somewhere. It's basically a rounded leaf with a spike, with a tip on it that's spiked up. And all I'm doing is just giving that spike a little bit of attitude and then coming on down. The fulling process, where we will structure out these petals, will cover a multitude of sins. So if I get a little, notch here, I'm not going to worry about it. That's just going to add to the natural look of things. And again, I'm keeping these petals all about the same size. if you want, you can change the sizes as you start out. You could start out very, very small on the small end, and you could go to very, very large. But for the size of succulents we're making, for me, I can do that difference in the petals from the small to the inner petals to the large outer petals. I can do a lot of that with the stretching that I do to fold these petals and to get them into their final shape. So I don't worry about having a size difference too much. All right, so I've got some more leftover scraps here. I am going to get both the orange and the blue soapy again. I'm going to work the petals a little bit, and then I'm going to take all three of my petal bits and I'm going to go and rinse them with hot water, then cold water, then hot water, then cold water, then hot water, then cold water, and we will come back and I'll show you how we're going to finish these up. Okay, the next step in our process, after we have rinsed out our fiber, rinsed out each of our strips, I'm re-wetting this one so I can show you the process. So we've rinsed this in hot water, then cold water, then hot water, then cold water, squeezed all the excess moisture out. I'm going to squeeze it out right now. And then as we go over each of the petals, we're just going to stretch them out and give them a little bit more dimension. We're kind of fluffing the petals. So we just take and work out all of those petals, pulling and stretching. By this point, we've got enough of a pre-felt and enough of a felting that we can stretch without it pulling apart. If you notice that you are lifting things away, then you need to do a little bit more felting. So this is, once we know we've got the felting done and we've got a nice solid piece that we can manipulate a little bit, and I just like to stretch all different directions, but make sure that the last time I stretch is crossways, because I want these petals to be nice and fluffed out. And I find that if I stretch them every bit of direction, that gives me a little bit extra real estate when it comes to the finished petal. So I'll stretch it up and down and sideways, and that is the wonderful thing about felt, the non-woven fabric. So we're right here on the last one, and we've got our strip all fluffed out. What I'm going to do is just fold over this extra green. Now I folded it twice at the skinny end, and then we are going to roll this with the colored side of our petals toward the inside of our roll. We're doing that so that when we splay those petals out, we can pull them open and have that colored fiber showing without any problem at all. Now when you're rolling, you want to make sure that you keep your spiral nice and flat down at the bottom. Otherwise you could end up with a spiral that the center just keeps going up and up and up, and you have to re-roll again. But if you keep it tight without having to put a lot of taut pressure on it, and if you keep an eye on your spiral, making sure that it's nice and flat, it shouldn't take you too long at all to get that rolled up. Then what you're going to do is just stab it with a long needle, and if you've got the ability to do so, you're going to hang this upside down so that it can drip dry. Now this is going to dry in this position of having that roll there, and it's going to give us the ability, once it's dry, to take and needle felt the center portion so that we can hold everything together. But first, we need to let it drip dry. So I'm going to set this off to the side. I have a spot right over here that can work as my drip dry station. and I want to show you what the next step would be. The next step will not require any water, but I'm going to leave my tray here just so that I can show you what our next step is going to be. The next thing you're going to do is, after it's dry, you're going to take and you are going to needle felt this curve and this roll into place. And I like to give quite a few stabs right here where that roll ends, but I also like to go around and stab all the way around my coil to help hold things in place. Because the next step is going to be adding our dirt fiber so that we can pot our succulents. But when we have this needle felted coil, then we're ready to go to the next step. Now, it doesn't have to be anything other than just tacked in place. That's what we're looking for. And let me pull my pot here. There we go. So we have our pot, and if we put it in here like this, it would be fine, but we want to build up a little bit of dirt and raise that succulent up a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is take some of this fiber that I sent you for the dirt. Now, you may notice some bits of veggie matter in here, and you go crazy if you want to pick all of that out. Personally, I'm not minding it because we're talking about dirt in a plant, okay? So what I want to do is I want to take this dirt roving, and that's just all it is. It's just roving that we're using like dirt, and I'm going to wrap it tightly around our coil, making sure that I'm not going up too far. I want to keep the bulk of this lower than the actual bloom or leaves of my succulent. And if I've got extra down at the bottom, that's even better. Because once I get it all wrapped around, then I'm going to take my needle and I am going to baste this dirt fiber into place, making sure that I am hitting into the coil that we just needle felted in place, watching out for my little leaves. And then once we've got this ready to go, then we can start playing with putting this into our pot. I'm going to hold it kind of at the center, and I am going to gently start stabbing toward the bottom of the pot, all the way around the succulent, all the way around the fibers. We want our dirt to be nice and attached, and we want it to sort of fit the inside of our pot just perfectly. That's why I am stabbing straight down into the pot here. Now, after we've gone all the way around our pot, then you can sort of take a look and pull out your leaves, fluff them up a little bit. Just going to move this over a bit. Some of my stabs are going straight down to the pot. Some of them are going at a little bit of an angle. Yeah, it looks like my favorite 45-degree angle. It does. And stab not only the dirt fibers, but also into that coil base, so that I make sure that I have got a nice connection between my dirt fibers, and I've got a bent needle here, so I'm going to switch to a different needle. But I want a nice connection between these fibers representing the dirt and the fibers that are my succulent. And now we've got almost a custom fit. Now, if you wish, you can certainly just put a dab of glue or a double stick tape down at the bottom, but this is the point where you can take and you can sort of tease out your leaves to go in different directions. Secure this with a little bit of glue if you wish, but it's certainly not required. And there is our finished succulent with our pot of dirt and in our clay pot. And that's all there is to it. It's a really fun and easy project. I hope that you've had a good time and that you are building up a nice collection of succulents in your little pots. I would love to see pictures, so please send me pictures. If you send them via email, I will post them for you. So that is the end of our project. I am so glad that you were here with me, and I look forward to seeing your succulents. Talk soon. Bye.